Okay, so I'm disconnected from the trailer. Second time today. And that truck in the distance, that's the guy named Gary. And I was happy to meet a guy who follows the same kind of like business model as me, you know. So it's just, he operates under his own name. So he just has a sole proprietorship, and he says he's been doing this stuff, you know, for many years. And you would think like this is Ontario, right? We are near all these big lakes, you know, and Ontario, Canada is not that famous for, you know, logging. It's all farms. And but turns out, Gary says you'd be surprised that there's quite a few good trees in here, like good timber. And you see, that's what he does. He came in here, and that's a rental machine that they asked me to move. So you see, there was trees in here probably, right? And they came in here with that machine, and somehow they removed all the trees. They cut them in pieces, and now they're ready for logging. And so basically, he's just using, just like me, you know, he's using his name, and then he registered the DBA, doing business as described. His what, and the DBA describes the business, right? So let's say for me, the easiest way would be, let's say, you know, my name's Sergey Drachev, and then I register on the same sheet. When you register sole proprietorship, you say Sergey Drachev Trucking, you know, and you can put that on your door and stuff like that, except I chose heavy haul, right? And you can choose any kind of spelling, and that's why quite often people are confused why my name is spelled differently. And that's why, because my proprietor name is spelled with a U, whereas the trade name I chose to be simpler, because most people don't know how to spell Russian names, and I don't blame them, right? And so I used I, and then I started noticing that it was creating issues with banking, you know, because banking is under my name, so they have to use the U, Sergey, you know, Sergey. But actually, it does make sense, because if you people familiar with some French words where there's a GU, that U helps to pronounce the first letter as G instead of J. Like, let's say the word guest, right? G-U-E-S-T. Why is this U in there? Because otherwise people would say jest, right? You put U, it becomes guest, you know? And that's why it's gesture, right? Because there's no U in there, G-E. And then guerrilla, right? Guerrilla, like a partisan, you know, guerrilla fighters, the same thing, G-U. And so actually G-U makes sense. And when I show my passport at the border, and I'm often quite surprised, you know, how well U.S. guys, and especially Canadian officers, they can read your name, you know, like they pronounce it properly, and that U in my first name actually helps it. Whereas if I just write it Sergey as like common, you know, S-E-R-G-E-I, I'm telling you, it's Serge, Sergei, Sergey, Sergey, you know, because again, there's G-E, and most people read that as a J, you know, and so nobody knows how to say it. And, but yeah, the problem is that, you know, I'm a Russian, and in Russia, we don't use a Latin alphabet. And what actually I was thinking about is how people that come from even Norway, Finland, you know, Italy, whatever, they just keep the same spelling of the name, and then you have to learn how to pronounce it, you know. But in my case, because we use Slavic, totally different alphabet, so they had to translate our Russian letters into English, and there's like 2,000 ways to do that, and that's why you see people coming from Russia or Soviet Union, in my case, and if it's Sergey, it can be spelled in 20 different, ways, but the one with the U, that's what I got in my legal documents when I was getting the visa from the Embassy of Canada in Moscow, Russia. That's what they just took my Russian passport where my name was already translated, and they just used that, And so I delivered this machine. So I spent 2 days at the border, and then they turned me around. They turned me around because they needed a original bill of sale. And so I spent another third night in Smith Creek or Port Huron. And I knew that there's a 50-50 chance that it might happen, but the guys never listen. I told them, like, I have to warn you, they might turn me back, basically hinting that I do need the originals, but nobody ever has them, right? And so then, I'm thinking, that's it, I'm stuck here till Monday. I'm making no money for the first 2 weeks. And then finally, that guy, the auction guy, was in Detroit. And so he sent me the paper by FedEx, like the original, and it was notarized. And I went to the border at 12 o'clock yesterday, Friday. And again, they were not happy. I said, okay, you guys turned me around yesterday. I worked with that lady over there. Because she was there. I said, I worked with that officer, and she said I needed the original, so she sent me back. Now I'm dealing with another guy, right? And this guy says his first opening remark was, he's looking at my paperwork, and I just told him this, right? That I worked with that officer, and I'm pointing. He's not looking there, and he looks at me and he says, I don't know who you worked with yesterday. Didn't I just tell you that I worked with that officer? But, he doesn't care. Now it's him as a barrier. It's just like with police. There's no laws. Like, the laws and rules don't matter. What matters is the interpretation of that law by this particular officer. And just like on the previous day, that particular inexperienced officer had no clue how to process an ITN shipment, because she was asking her colleagues. But okay, I understand, like a newly hired, you need to train, but don't you do that in classroom? Like, if I am a trucker, right, you don't just let me loose on the road. Hey buddy, how do you turn around? How do I back? Can you help me back? People would laugh at me, right? So you train before you start doing your job, not on the job with the customer. Like, I show up with this guy, Gary, and I say, hey, Gary, I'm sorry, I just got my driver's license. I never used these chains before. You know how these binders work? How do you think this guy, Gary, would look at me? Would he hire me again? Probably not. But government officials, and it's everywhere like that. It doesn't matter. Japan, Russia, Poland, Cuba, US, it's bureaucracy. They're paid by the hour, by the salary, so they don't care about your time. Oh yeah, you don't have this piece of paper. You have to go back. And so now the second guy says, and he says, no, I don't know who you work with. It's like one guy says, you should write a book, but it's whole life it's a comedy, like, you cannot make this up. And so this guy, his face is like, of course, I'm a criminal, because they are trained to treat everybody as a criminal unless proven innocent. Like, it's the opposite of what is accepted in a democratic society. Yeah, so I don't know who you worked with yesterday, but okay, you have the original. Okay, where's the printed copy of the email you received from us when you did the 72-hour notification? I'm like, what? And I said, and of course, you cannot argue with them. You start arguing just like with cops, you start arguing, you're going back, or you get a fine, or you go to prison. And I said, I'm sorry, I told them, but usually I have it. Like, basically it's automatic response they get from the CBP when they do that 72-hour notification. And he gave me a piece of paper, says, yeah, make sure next time they do this. So he says, this time I'm not going to turn you around. I said, thank you, sir. And he let me go, and then I spent the night at Flying J, waiting for the payment. The payment was made, but I don't know, I don't see it yet in my account. Okay, the guy's here, so let's put this thing over here. We're gonna record this. And so yeah, now I'm moving, I found this machine. We're gonna move this back to Toronto. It's a rental.